Intelligence is always associated with good actions, and being smarter and brighter means making better decisions to improve both their lives and those of their environment. However, this is not always the case. And sometimes childhood traumas sculpt a hateful personality that can be superimposed on a greater intelligence. And in these cases, being brilliant only serves to commit even more atrocities without being discovered. This is what you will meet in this video. A group of charismatic, brilliant people with almost gifted intelligence who commit the most atrocious and disconcerting crimes you can imagine. Actions that completely contrast, considering that they were much, much more intelligent than the average. The characters that you will meet today are extraordinary as they are sinister, and that will surely impact you. My name is Leonore Clay, and this is The Darkest Secret. Today we present the evil people with the highest IQs in history. Number 6. Before starting and to better understand this video, let me tell you that all of us can measure our intelligence through IQ tests. Generally, a mentally healthy person has an average IQ range of 85 to 119, allowing you to function normally in your life. But be careful. This figure refers to the real IQ tests, not the ones that you find on the internet, which for the most part only cover logic tests, leaving out at least 5 other areas that are necessary to reveal a real IQ index. It is understood that when a person exceeds an IQ of 119, they begin to perceive the world differently, since they have generated many more neural pathways than a normal person. A person with an IQ of 120 and above will be able to conclude many more things with the information they receive. Empathy towards others is supposed to make it easier for you to learn new things too. They tend to find solutions to real-life problems more quickly. They understand instructions the first time because they can process information better. I tell you this because it is absolutely unusual what a high IQ does to evil people. The first of them, then, is a character as intriguing as he is troubling. I'm referring to Ted Bundy. A man with dark hair and piercing eyes, who also had a kind, harmless face, an advantage that he used to become one of the most notorious serial killers in history. A character who, before becoming a name that evoked terror, was a promising university student, a brilliant mind who for a long time went completely unnoticed in his surroundings. With an IQ of 136, it was not difficult for Bundy to graduate with merit from the University of Washington, an advantage for his generation who had a bright future ahead of him. In fact, he even entered politics as a member of the Republican Party. Perhaps this point in his life is where we can best see how intelligent he was. For a time, he worked as a spy for a politician. He was in charge of studying the competition and interviewed people to find out their positions and what things to say to charm people. His work allowed this politician to be re-elected several times. It was quite an achievement. However, unfortunately for him, that unmatched talent, that goodness that intelligence provides, was overshadowed by the dark desire that he had carried since he was a teenager. He was dragging under his being a monster that was always screaming to come out, and his IQ couldn't contain it. any longer. With him, he kept an uncontrollable desire to dominate another, to become the master and lord of a person of the opposite sex, so much as to even control when they lived or died. Thus, using his charm and intelligence, he appeared polite and academic in front of the girls who saw him as a good match, especially because of his way of speaking. He knew many things, and talking to him was gratifying as a result of his vast knowledge. This is how he convinced his victims to follow him towards their own death. In his life, he managed to commit a series of gruesome kidnappings and murders of women in several states in the United States. His high IQ allowed him to understand how the police operated, and he understood the most efficient way to commit crimes, so it was very difficult for him to be associated with it. He used to watch the news and was attentive to information about murders, so if his murder was reported, he would take note of the clues that the police had, and if someone had seen a man without a mustache, then he would grow a mustache, as if they described him as walking completely upright. Then later, he walked differently. Even when time passed and the police already had evidence accumulated against him, he managed to escape police custody on 2 occasions, making him a master of evasion. Using disguises and ruthless cunning, he outwitted law enforcement in his pursuit, creating a manhunt of what they described at the time as being of epic proportions. After being captured again and already on trial, Bundy made the unusual decision to represent himself. Taking advantage of his intelligence and rhetorical skills, he attempted to manipulate the legal process to his advantage. And while his charisma impressed some, he could not escape the overwhelming evidence against him. Finally, he was convicted of his crimes and sentenced to the death penalty, which was carried out at the end of the 1980s. The story of Ted Bundy is a grim reminder of how intelligence and charisma can hide a dark and sinister side. His case demonstrates that evil can manifest itself in the most unexpected ways, in that the justice system can prevail over even the most cunning individual. Number 5. Elizabeth Holmes, a young entrepreneur who seemed destined to change the world of healthcare, left an indelible mark on business history. But not precisely because of her success. Her rise and fall are so far a striking testimony of persuasion, ambition, and deception. For an early age, she demonstrated outstanding intelligence and an innate talent for convincing. It is estimated that she has an IQ of 137, and the truth is that intelligence is indeed reflected in what she did throughout her life. You see, Elizabeth founded the Heinous, a company that promised to revolutionize medical testing through innovative technology. She had the ability to sell her ideas with a passion and conviction that attracted investors, even highly educated and experienced people. One of the most notable examples was Channing Robertson, a PhD and Stanford professor. Elizabeth managed to persuade him by talking to him and perhaps even showing him the technology she had built, technology that never really existed. It's equivalent to saying, "I'm working on a kind of teleporter where you can move from A to B instantly." And when asked, I managed to convince even academics that I'm really on the right track. That's how spectacular her ability to convince was. For that, she had to offer prototypes that really seemed to work. What Elizabeth was proposing was a portable device for performing blood tests, something extremely practical and worked with just a drop of blood and delivered almost immediate results. The surprising thing is that she designed tests and results that seemed perfectly credible, which is why she deceived millionaires who invested their lives in this innovative technology that never existed and never worked. Science was apparently on her side, and her skill in convincing brilliant scientists and businessmen that her vision was feasible was also considered an achievement in itself. Silicon Valley, with its fervor for innovation, simply fell at their feet. However, this would be an empire that would soon collapse. When her own employees began to accuse her of lack of ethics for endangering patients, her whole world collapsed. She always wanted to be a businesswoman, and she had achieved it. They even bought her with Steve Jobs. She ended up being accused of fraud and other crimes related to her company. She was put on trial in 2021 and found guilty of multiple charges. Subsequently, in January 2022, a 20-year prison sentence was handed down, ended her reign of deceit. The fact that her parents had a good reputation in the industry influenced how the world perceived Elizabeth Holmes. Without a doubt, her last name, her intelligence and charismatic presence helped open doors and gain the trust of key people in her eyes. However, in the end, the truth prevailed, and Elizabeth Holmes went from a promising Silicon Valley figure to a convict. This serves as a reminder to pay close attention to people who tend to easily gain everyone's trust. That, guys, is a skill. Number 4. According to experts, the threshold that divides the intelligent from the genius lies in the IQ of 140. And although today that limit has increased, and everyone above 180 is now recognized as a genius, by the time most of the people mentioned in this video, I-40 was the IQ that separated the clever from the simply brilliant. Having an IQ of 140 means that you are no longer normal, that you have an intelligence that separates you from the rest. Genius is understood as a person who sees things differently, manages to connect things that others cannot. For example, Steve Jobs' visionary ability might come naturally to a genius. The way Einstein concluded things regarding physics is also typical of a genius. A genius is easy to contribute new ideas. It is easy to invent lines of thought that others must study to understand, when the genius simply sees them. Knowing that there are murderers who have an IQ of 140 is extremely curious. Well, Frank Abagnale has the answer. For many, Frank Abagnale Jr. is a name that evokes an astonishing tale of cunning and invasion in the world of financial crime. With an exceptionally high IQ that is theorized to be around 140, Abagnale became one of the most famous scammers, his life being a fascinating story of ingenuity and escape. Have you seen the movie Catch Me If You Can? Well, yes. That's Frank Abagnale. From an early age, Abagnale demonstrated a keen intelligence and a gift for deception. At age 16, he began his criminal career as a master forgery. For years, he posed as an airline pilot and managed to travel around the world for free, scamming airlines with fake checks that he himself figured out how to make almost 100% real. In fact, his technique was innovative. He had invented the best technique for forging checks. But without a doubt, what makes Frank Abagnale's story even more remarkable is his ability to deceive justice. The authorities pursued him tirelessly, but his ability to change identities and his sharp wit made him virtually uncatchable. He even posed as a doctor at a Georgia hospital and was doing well, spending several months before being discovered. That was his greatest talent. His IQ helped him quickly understand what characterized certain professions, how they stood, and how professionals gestured and spoke. He managed to learn even the basic knowledge he needed for them to believe that he really was what he said he was, being a doctor, teacher, pilot, or lawyer. In order to pass as a doctor, he read medical books for a couple of weeks. He even passed the test to obtain a law degree. He didn't even study law for a year. He managed to obtain the degree anyway. He did it because he noticed the vulnerability that the state of Louisiana allowed you to take the exam as many times as necessary. He only did it until he passed. Finally, in 1969, Abell was arrested in France and later extradited to the United States. He served time in prison, but his intelligence was not wasted. After his release, the United States government hired him as a consultant to help combat fraud and counterfeiting, going from a master of deception to becoming the strongest defender of the law. His life and experiences were so incredible that they inspired the book Catch Me If You Can by Frank W. Abell Jr., as well as the film of the same name starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. Frank Abell went from notorious criminal to security expert, and his story is a testament of the power of redemption and reintegration into society for a man whose intelligence and mental brilliance were being rightly wasted. Number 3. While the previous two were scammers rather than dangerous psychopaths, that changes in this position. Edmund Keer, a clear example of what IQ can do to a disturbed mind. Known for his astonishing IQ of 145, Keer was a brutal serial killer who left a sinister mark on the history of crime, a story full of intrigue and mysteries that also involved his exceptional intelligence. Keer was a man who killed for practically no apparent reason. His ability to convince his victims of his harmlessness, often with the use of his intelligence and sympathy, made him even more terrifying. He frequently posed as a friendly driver, offering his assistance to young women, gaining their trust before his true intentions were revealed in chilling ways. He often deceived them with his persuasion skills, to the point that he even made them question their intuition and instincts. However, one of the aspects that best highlighted Keer's IQ was using as a strategy to interact with police officers, gaining their friendship. Despite being a serial killer, he showed so much kindness and friendliness that the law enforcement officers who met him could not believe he was dangerous. They even argued with him about the evidence of the murders without knowing that they were facing the person who committed them. Despite his unprecedented string of murders, Keer voluntarily surrendered to authorities. His IQ did not leave him alone. His animal side tormented him all the time. He knew it was wrong. He knew the pain he caused to families. He had kidnapped some girls, but he controlled himself and let them go. He promised himself that he would never do it again. But a week later, his outburst led him to take his mother's life, and that was the last straw. He turned himself in and admitted his crimes, surprising everyone who knew him. His time on Earth took the lives of 8 women, including his mother. The remorse was such, the guilt was such, that he requested death by torture. However, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Already inside prison, Kemper contributed to the police in their understanding of the minds of serial killers, providing valuable information that helped in solving other cases. This is due to his deep analysis of himself, to understand where his impulses came from. He said he suspects it was because of the incredible abuse he suffered as a child at the hands of his mother, both physical and psychological. As the years passed, Kemper battled his own inner demons. Several times he expressed his desire for death, as if a part of his inner genius could not bear the barbarities of his actions. His story is a shocking reminder of how intelligence and evil can coexist in a human mind, and how human beings often face deep and dark internal conflicts. Number 2. Charlene Gayo, a woman whose exceptional intelligence was revealed at different stages of her life. She lived a story that oscillated between early promise and a dark turn toward crime. From her childhood, she showed signs of a sharp and curious mind, especially due to the influence of her father, who took her to his work and immersed her in the world of business and technology. Until this point in her life, adolescence, she was nothing less than a promise, a great professional, someone who would contribute a lot to society. However, some of that bright life bored her, and she began to seek risks, having many stormy relationships, fell into drugs, and went down the wrong path. Charlene's life ended up taking a sinister turn when she became involved with Gerald Gallego, a man with a terrible criminal record. Charlene, whose IQ was rumored to be over 160, used her intelligence in a surprising and inexplicable manner, convincing and encouraging her partner to commit increasingly crude and sinister acts. They weren't called slave killers for nothing. Her victims became just that. 11 were her fatal victims. In the end, and when they were tired, she was left as the victim, as if she loved Gerald so much that she wanted to satisfy him in everything, so that he would not leave her. She managed to find patterns that she incorporated into her personality to appear submissive and manipulable, so much so that Gerald himself never said that he was influenced by her. However, later studies show that Charlene did have psychopathic tendencies and a hidden desire for the perverse. Apparently, she found the ideal partner to make her wishes come true. Finally, and after the trial, the court ruled that Charlene and her partner were guilty of all the crimes charged. She entered prison in 1983, a sentence that would end in 1997 when she was released. She was imprisoned for only 14 years due to the way in which she presented herself to the jury, something that Gerald did not enjoy, since although he was sentenced to death, he died of cancer during his confinement in 2002. Now this woman is free and is very dangerous. There are some who say that she should remain in prison because of what she is capable of doing. However, in the eyes of justice, she was only a victim of the control of an abusive man. However, her longing for darkness is probably still latent, and she is the best at convincing others to commit the crudest crimes. Just think, Gerald was aggressive. Yes, he was nefarious. But before Charlene, he had never murdered anyone. Charlene Gallego's story is a disturbing reflection of how intelligence can be used for dark purposes and how a sharp mind can be manipulated to commit heinous acts. Her story combines the promise of a bright future with a descent into darkness and raises fascinating questions about human psychology and evil. Number 1. We conclude this video with one who for many was considered the genius of terror, and I mean Ted Kazinski, or also known as the Unabomber, is a figure that has fascinated and baffled the public for decades due to his intellectual brilliance and his criminal acts being his story, a mix of genius and madness that left a mark deep in American history. From an early age, Kazinski demonstrated outstanding talent in mathematics and science. His academic achievements brought him to prominence, and his IQ of 167 placed him in the genius range. After graduating from Harvard University, he continued his studies at the University of Michigan, where he earned a doctorate in mathematics. However, despite his brilliance, Kazinski chose a radically different path by abandoning society and living in isolation in a cabin in Montana. His isolation led him to develop a deep hostility toward modern technology and industrialization, leading him to commit a series of bombings that terrorized the United States for nearly 2 decades. His modus operandi was the original bomb letters. Kazinski sent 16 bombs to different targets, including university and airlines, killing 3 people and wounding 23 others. Kazinski created a manifesto titled Industrial Society and Its Future, in which he explained his motivations and anti-technology beliefs. Although his manifesto was broad and complex, it reflected a mind endowed with extraordinary intelligence, but also tormented by his perception of the threat of technology in society. He was finally arrested in 1996 after his brother David provided clues that led to his capture. At trial, Kazinski, defending himself, attempted to get his message out to the world and evade a guilty verdict, but was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Ted Kazinski's life is a terrifying reminder of how extreme intelligence can twist and lead to extreme actions, finding its story a labyrinth of genius, alienation, and terror. It sheds light on the dangers of society alienation and obsession with extreme ideals. From the perspective of experts, when cases of this type are investigated, it is observed that a considerable number of these individuals experienced untreatable trauma during their childhood, which triggered significant psychological alterations. These traumas, in most cases, are related to abusive situations. In fact, around 70% of the people highlighted in this video have expressed in their statements that they were victims of abuse at some point in their lives. It is important to note that this condition, as already mentioned, is not always reflected in your cognitive abilities. Some of these individuals were identified as extremely geniuses, whose intelligence was unfortunately used to carry out dark purposes. Without a doubt, these cases give us the opportunity to analyze and conclude that in most of these, the environment in which a person grows up can be even more influential than their own intelligence. This environment can lead brilliant individuals to make extremely poor decisions that can have a lasting impact on the lives of many people. I hope you like this video, because we have come to an end. My name is Leonore Clay, and this was The Darkest Secret.